this is basically what I gained from a great journey I made to the East that I'll talk about, and that I put into this book, The One Work, A Journey Towards the Self. I remember writing it just after we'd got married and crying many tears because I didn't seem to be able to get it to come out right. It was very difficult, but it came out in the end. So I will just go to this painting. This is a painting of my husband's, and I think that it really encapsulates the journey, the spiritual journey. And I say that the one work is the path to reunion with the divine ground. It may take the soul many lifetimes to complete this journey. And the key to discovering and following this path is love. Love of truth, love of beauty, love of whatever moves your heart. Maybe many things in the course of a lifetime. In 1956, when I was 25 and my life was stuck in a rut, my life unexpectedly opened out in a new direction with the opportunity to visit India and the Far East. That journey led to an encounter with cultures and spiritual traditions which offered the greatest possible contrast to my own European one and enormously expanded the horizon of my life. My first view of India was of the Himalayan mountains, but these were so far above the normal horizon that they were utterly astounding. I couldn't believe it that they were so high above where the airplane was. I was an air hostess at that time. That's how I got to India. To my left were these incredible mountains, and to my right and below me, the vastness of India with its great rivers flowing down from the Tibetan plateau. India symbolized to me the mythical destination of all explorers, an unknown, mysterious, fabulous land. It seemed as if each line of poetry that had stirred the reeds of longing, each image of beauty and fragment of what seemed to be truth, had served to lead me to a decision I seemed to have taken centuries ago. I had to search in all the varied experience of life before I could realize its presence. I felt that the decision to go to India was therefore no sudden choice. It had always been with me, awaiting the moment of recognition. In India, I discovered the ravishing grace of men and women in their turbans and saris, and the staggering size and beauty of a landscape utterly different from anything I had ever seen or imagined. Everywhere I went, I felt the presence of a very ancient civilization and the extraordinary range of the human imagination and artistic genius expressed in art and architecture, in poetry, literature, music, and the creation of every kind of beauty, from the fantastic sculptures on the temple walls to the exquisite designs stamped on the saris that were displayed in the markets. What struck me most was the sense of timelessness, that very little had changed in tens of thousands of years. The temples were thronged with hundreds of people bringing offerings to the various goddesses and gods, obviously deeply emotionally involved in their rituals. I found a richer, deeper, more vibrant experience of life than I could find in my own country and culture at that time. I saw that gods and goddesses were not just present in their images, but were mysteriously immanent and integrated into everyday life. They were still, after thousands of years, vibrantly alive in the imagination of the people. Now, this is an image of the Trimurti, or the three major gods of Hinduism: Vishnu on the left, Brahma in the middle, and Shiva on the right. But I found this extraordinary image on the internet about 6 months ago, which shows that the origin of all goddesses and gods in India is the Great Mother, sometimes called Kali, sometimes called other names. But here she is in a modern version, with all the gods inside her heart in the lotus there. I think it's such a beautiful image and so eloquent of what the Indians really believed, that Kali, or the Great Mother, was the origin of all, including all the gods and goddesses. So I just put that in there. I was also moved by the incredible beauty and magnificence of the land and the warmth, beauty, and grace of the people. The sheer richness and color of India, the breadth and depth of its culture were overwhelming. I was struck by the abundance of the markets, the exquisite designs on women's saris, and the thronging number of people who everywhere, despite being poor beyond any European concept of poverty, had an immense dignity, beauty, and grace. As I traveled, I saw that in all these different times and places, a rich and potent humus had been created by countless human beings over countless millennia: artists, poets, mystics, astronomers, musicians, architects, philosophers, mathematicians, scientists, and a few wise and extraordinary men like the Mughal ruler Akbar, whose patronage had fertilized the deep subsoil of culture. But there was also the moving vista of millions of people, so poor that they were barely able to survive, yet nevertheless creating incredible beauty with their hands. By weaving, dyeing, stamping brilliantly colored cotton and silk cloth with ancient designs, carving wood and sculpting stone with incredible skill over countless generations, they nurtured an age-old culture in India and Asia, transmitting it through millennia. I think you can only feel this in India and the Far East. You don't feel it in Europe at all. So the following year, through contacts in Rome, I had the good fortune to be offered a job collecting photographs from the museums in India and the Far East for an Italian encyclopedia of art. To choose the photographs, I would need to travel from country to country, visiting the sacred sites and museums of India, Burma, Thailand, Indonesia, Japan, and Taiwan. I couldn't go to China because it was out of bounds at the time. I would also have rapidly to assimilate not only the history of each culture, but also its religious spirit as expressed in its art, because art in these great cultures was inseparable from religion, and this would take me into the heart of each culture. It was a journey of discovery beyond my wildest dreams. Can you imagine at 25? I don't know if any of you here are 25, but suddenly your life expands in a most dramatic way, and you can't believe it as you travel, as you're taken traveling through all these different countries. It was the sheer splendor of the art, sculpture, and temple architecture of India and Asia that first kindled my strong attraction to Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. Only later was it deepened and extended through the sacred texts that I studied. In the dark recesses of a great cavern in Taiwan, where half the imperial treasure taken from Beijing by Chiang Kai-shek had been stored for safety, I had my first glimpse of the Taoist paintings of the Song dynasty and my first real encounter with Chinese art. I was struck not only by its utter difference from the art of India and the West, but by its different quality of soul and its connection with the incredible landscape of China. This is one of the most beautiful paintings I've ever seen, I think. And if you look closely, you can see tiny temples tucked in among the great masses of trees and mountains. As I traveled to places like Angkor Wat in Cambodia, as well as to many sites in India, Thailand, and Burma, and the museums in the capital cities, I felt myself entering the heart of Hindu and Buddhist sculpture, deeply awed by the sculptor's power to evoke in stone the immanent presence of spirit. The skill of these thousands of unknown sculptors was simply mind-blowing. In the course of these journeys, I came across sculpture after sculpture of Mount Sumeru, the holy mountain of Hindu mythology. The central tower in this picture is a symbol of that mountain. In fact, all three are the symbol of that mountain. In Cambodia, I discovered that many of the temples of Angkor, half buried in the jungle, evoke this same image. Every single temple tower represented this holy mountain, which was the sacred heart of the universe, as well as the divine ground hidden within the heart of every human being. I felt that my quest had led me to discover this image carved in stone and enshrined in the mythology that was still so vibrantly alive in India and much of Asia. Once again, in Indonesia, I found the holy mountain of Borobudur. You climb it by moving always to the left, ascending level after level until you reach the top where seated Buddhas await you and a stupendous view of the surrounding forest. I should mention here that in Indonesia also they found a temple that they think is 20,000 years old, similar in shape to this one of Borobudur. Very few people know about it. It's only Graham Hancock who has brought it to light, and you can see it on Netflix if you go into his series of lectures on these forgotten temples and forgotten civilizations. In India, there are certain places that have been venerated for centuries, owing to the presence of a continuous line of rishis, the sages, seers, or shamans, who were recognized as masters of meditation and the path to the experience of enlightenment or moksha. They taught their followers to look inward to the source of consciousness as the invisible ground of the world we perceive with our senses. Whereas the West has predominantly engaged in mastery of the external world, the great spiritual leaders of India and Asia were focused on access to the inner world of the soul as long ago as 10,000 BC. At Tiruvannamalai in southern India, I visited the ashram of the great Indian sage Sri Ramana shortly after his death, and walked the 9 miles around Arunachala, the sacred mountain which symbolized the same holy mountain that I knew was the symbol of the divine ground. It was here that I encountered his teaching of repeatedly asking myself the question, who am I? Until I was able to answer it many decades later. When the concept of reincarnation was explained to me, the claustrophobic weight of the Western concept of a single life was transformed into a great vista of lives, both past and future, as I encountered concepts such as the law of karma, the belief that one's life experiences are the result of actions and experiences in past lives, that one's present actions affect future lives, and the idea that we reincarnate countless times in many different bodies, gradually growing in spiritual insight and moving ever closer to the holy mountain and reunion with the divine ground. The concept of this reunion was carried in other words of Sri Ramana that I remembered long after I left India. Your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world. That's an amazing statement. These journeys gave me a perspective on life which could only be acquired by physically traveling to far distant places. The discovery of Hinduism, Buddhism, and later Taoism brought release from the prison of a Christianity that I had experienced as claustrophobic, oppressive, and forbidding. In these traditions, I did not find the Christian guilt-inducing sense of sin, but rather the belief that suffering was due to ignorance, that humanity was unconscious or unawakened rather than marred in sin. So when I came back to England, I put everything that had entranced my eye and evoked a response from my heart into my first book, the one work, A Journey Towards the Self, with the labyrinth of Chartres in the center of it, because that too is a symbol of the holy mountain or the holy center at the heart of life. So this was an account of my 2 journeys to the East in 1956 and 57, and my quest to understand the quintessential message of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, and relate this to a deeper understanding of Christianity. The focus of the book was an attempt to describe a different concept of spirit, one that was equated with an unseen divine ground, creating and sustaining all forms of life, rather than a male creator remote from creation, bringing creation into being. What I found was that all the sacred literature of India, from the Vedas through the Upanishads to the treatises on yoga and the Buddhist sutras, teaches the method of inner growth, which leads to the experience of enlightenment or union with the divine ground. The lotus was the symbol of this process of growth, from unseen depths beneath the earth to ultimate flowering. Now, the Hindu cosmology or vision of creation was as follows. All life derives from a primal one called Brahman. All matter is a manifestation of spirit. Therefore, there is no duality. Creation emanates organically from the inside out. It is cyclical and renews itself over enormous cycles of time called kalpas and mahakalpas. All creation is the expression of Brahman's creativity, his divine play or lila. Creation and the unfolding process of evolution are seen as a divine and intelligent unfolding of Brahman's intention. So the universe is a vast living organism. It is the body of Brahman and is sacred. The earth and all life forms on it are also sacred. The essential teaching of Hinduism is that we have two natures, a human and a divine, a mortal and an immortal. The teaching of India's greatest seers or shamans was to help us to become aware of the divinity dwelling unrecognized within us, that they themselves had experienced. This could be seen as a huge evolutionary advance for our whole species, if it were only understood. This is about the concept of the Atman, or indwelling divine self. They saw that everything that exists, whether manifest or unmanifest, is Brahman, the supreme deity. The divine essence of every individual is Brahman. Atman, the indwelling divine self, is also Brahman. So there is no duality in these marvelous creations of the Indian soul. The macrocosmic Brahman and the microcosmic Atman are one and the same in essence. All this universe is in truth Brahman. He is the beginning and end and the life of all. From one of the Upanishads. Now, the oneness or unity of all that exists is the one central insight into truth to which all Indian wisdom points. This insight is not alien to other cultures, but in India, all the great sages again and again return to it. Although the truth is easily stated as all is one, the sages have also said that the realization of this truth in the core of one's being can take many lifetimes. And the realization of this truth is held to be the purpose of human existence. All art, philosophy, and science, if they are true, reflect this vision and further its realization. That quotation is from a wonderful book called Science and the Sacred, which I recommend to you, by Ravi Ravindra, who has also written many other books on the Christian Gospels. He's an extraordinary man. He's still alive. He lives in Nova Scotia. He's teacher there. So there are three basic concepts in Hinduism. First of all, reincarnation. We do not have only one life, as in the beliefs of the West, whether Christian or secular. We have an infinite vista of lives, and the purpose of these many lives is to evolve from an unconscious state to a fully conscious one, or a state of enlightenment or union with Brahman, the divine ground. Secondly, there's the concept of karma. Karma is closely associated with the idea of reincarnation and the idea of a moral universe. The essential idea is that your actions have effects. If you do harm in one life, you make reparation for it in future lives. If you do good, you reap the effects of your actions. And thirdly, there was the concept of enlightenment or moksha, which is the experience of seeing truly into the nature of reality. Now, this is a concept of Maya, which is quite important to understand, because illusion is the word generally used to translate the word Maya. But this doesn't really cover its meaning. It is more that we are deceived by the physical appearance of the world that we live in and take the material world to be the only reality. This, for example, is the current belief of scientific materialism or scientism in our culture at the moment. So we appear to die. We appear to be just physical beings. We appear to begin our lives when we are born. But all these are really illusions. We need to penetrate beneath the veil of illusions to know the truth, to know who we really are and where we come from. Suffering arises from ignorance of who we are and what we are part of, and from living life purely through the survival instincts of the ego. I'll return to that later. And this state is called samsara. And there are 5 states of consciousness according to the teaching of India. The conscious state, which is the one controlled by the ego and survival instincts, the dreaming state, deep dreamless sleep, the I am awareness state. Both Jesus or Yeshua uses this phrase in the book, The Gospel of the Beloved Companion, which I will speak of later. And finally, union with the divine ground from which all arises. So that's just a very brief outline. Now, the science of yoga, I studied this when I was in India, and I tried to summarize it in the one work. It's the path of reunion with the source, but there are many different kinds or types of yoga. There's hatha yoga, the way of harmonizing the body. There's bhakti yoga, which is the way of loving service. Think of all the carers in our society who look after people when they're old and dying. That is the way of loving service. Raja yoga, the way of purifying the mind. Jnana yoga, the way of intuitive realization or insight. Karma yoga, the way of action, which Andrew Harvey has put so much emphasis on. And dhyana yoga, the way of meditation. But each of these is suited to different types of people at different stages of life. There's not one way for all, or even one way for one person. They're different stages, which I think is such a wise teaching. So I've just given here this rather beautiful image of the 7 chakras. I'm not going to go into them because you probably know enough about them already. But there are the 7 levels of consciousness in the body that need to be contemplated on, connected with, and meditated on, really, throughout one's life, once one has embarked on that path. Now I come to the Upanishads, which are my favorite texts, which were written down between 600 and 200 BC, often by people living in the forest. Goodness knows how they managed to write them down and have them saved and preserved for us today. It's just an incredible story. The best known texts are the later Upanishads, dating from 600 to 200 BC, and the Bhagavad Gita, or Song of the Lord. In the Upanishads, we have the full splendor of the revelation of an inner vision to a relatively small number of initiates whose names are unknown. We find the search for and the discovery of the inner true nature of man. The essential focus of the Upanishadic sages was to explore the relationship between man and the universe, and the subtlety of insight and the sublime beauty of these writings is simply incomparable. In the Upanishads, it is as if we are listening to the universe becoming conscious of itself through the soul of the writer. Listen to the divine immanence of these words. Glory be to that God who is in the fire, who is in the waters, who is in the plants and trees, who is in all things in this vast creation. Unto that Spirit be glory and glory. Our task as humans is to realize this and to penetrate the veil which hides the revelation that we are in our essence immortal and divine beings, part of the creative life of the universe. This is one of my favorites. And then he saw that Brahman was joy, for from joy all beings have come. By joy they all live, and into joy they all return. The Bhagavad Gita is the most complete manual of the path to union. Thine own consciousness, shining, void, and inseparable from the great body of radiance, hath no birth or death, and is the immutable light. He who sees that the Lord of all is ever the same in all that is, immortal in the field of mortality, he sees the truth. And when a man sees that the God in himself is the same God in all that is, he hurts not himself by hurting others. Then he goes indeed to the highest path. Only through constant love can I be known and seen as I really am and entered into. Fix your mind on me. Give your heart's love to me. Consecrate all your actions to my service. Hold your own self as nothing before me. To me you will come. Truly I promise, for you are dear to me. And finally, this is Krishna speaking. I am the one source of all. The evolution of all comes from me. I am beginningless, unborn, the Lord of the worlds. I am the soul which dwells in the heart of all things. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all that lives. I am the seed of all things that are, and no being that moves or moves not can ever be without me. See now the whole universe with all things that move and move not, and whatever thy soul may yearn to see it all as one in me. Now I'm going to move on to Buddhism. My first encounter with Buddhism was this marvelous painting from the walls of the Ajanta caves. It's of the Bodhisattva. I would urge all of you to visit those caves if you possibly can, because they are absolutely miraculous. The first Buddhist cave paintings in Ajanta date from the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, but during the 5th and 6th centuries AD, many more richly decorated caves were added to the original group. The Buddha himself is thought to have lived from 563 to 483 BC. He was born in the town of Lumbini in what is now Nepal. And this is the statue that I found in the museum in Bangkok, the National Museum. And I just nearly fainted with, I don't know what really, astonishment at the beauty of it, the sheer power of it. Whoever made that was in touch with the divine essence. And that was so true of so many artists in India and in China. They really entered into the soul of what they were expressing. On the night of his awakening under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha entered a state of cosmic consciousness where he had a vision of the entire evolutionary process and the need for humanity to awaken from a state of unconsciousness or collective amnesia. The word Buddha means awake. And the great coils that he's seated on and that are protecting him are the coils of the serpent goddess Musalinda, who is really the goddess of the earth and is protecting him with her hoods. Most marvelous image. So when in the morning, after his awakening experience, he said, "Now art thou seen, O builder. Never again shalt thou build house for me. Broken are the beams and sundered lies the ridgepole. My mind is set on the eternal. Extinguished is all desire." The word Buddha means awake, as I said before, and the emphasis is on compassion, reincarnation, samsara, and the working out of karma, contemplation and meditation as paths to realization, non-violence and the realization of our Buddha nature, the Buddha nature of rocks and trees, the interdependence and oneness of all life, and no killing of animals to feed humans. So that's a kind of summary of what he was teaching. And he taught the Four Noble Truths, which were all life is suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way to the cessation of suffering. In separating himself from Hinduism, because he was brought up in the Hindu tradition, the Buddha said that the noble truths he was teaching were not among the doctrines handed down, but that there arose within him the eye to perceive them, the knowledge of their nature, the understanding of their cause, and the wisdom that lights the true path, the light that expels darkness. I should say that by his time, the general teaching of Hinduism had kind of fallen into platitudes and kind of loss of the true spirit. And he really came to reanimate the real spirit of Hinduism. He's teaching basically the same thing, but it's put in a different way, in a very clear way. People really understood what he was teaching. I think he was the first psychologist to define the causes and the cure of human suffering. His teaching was almost the same as the basic premise of Hinduism, but it had a different emphasis. He said our nature has two aspects, the ordinary mind dominated by the ego and survival instincts. He didn't use the word survival instincts, but I put it in there because that's what he was meaning. And the whole complete or awake mind, or our Buddha nature. The true purpose of our existence is to seek the experience of our whole cosmic Buddha mind and free ourselves from the control of the ego, which acts as an organ of limitation. We need it to negotiate the world that we're in. We need it to negotiate technology, which is a nightmare when you have to start learning about it. But it's not the only thing that we need. And this is what he was teaching, although technology didn't exist then. So if the Buddha mind is our natural condition, our essential nature, what prevents us from experiencing it right now, today? And the answer is the innate conditioning of the ego that tries to adapt to the deficient values that govern the world, the intractable power of our survival instincts, and the social conditioning and programming we receive as we grow up. These can give rise to dukkha, or suffering, until we become aware of their influence and free ourselves from this conditioning. So how do we awaken to our Buddha nature? And he said that we should follow the Noble Eightfold Path. And he defined this in this way. Sometimes the word perfect is used instead of right, but I've used right here. So we have right understanding, right intentions, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right has a sense of singleness of purpose or alignment with a spiritual goal. Following the Eightfold Path initiates an alchemical transformation whereby the base metal of our normal consciousness is slowly transformed into gold. I'll come to this more in my talk tomorrow. But if you apply this to our world today, which is in such a terrible mess, if people understood that these eightfold things would sort out a great many of the problems, we could have much less suffering. The emphasis of his teaching was always on love and compassion. Compassion for all sentient beings flowed from the heart of the Buddha like water from a fountain. I think his most important task may have been to awaken the heart chakra in those he taught. All good works whatever are not worth 1/16th part of love which sets free the heart. Love which sets free the heart shines, gives light and radiance. Like a mother who protects her child, her only child, with her own life, one should cultivate a heart of unlimited love and compassion towards all living beings. There's a wonderful story of a man who was really lowest of the low, collecting the filth from everybody else. And the Buddha stopped by him and asked him if he would like to join his order. And of course, the man was absolutely overjoyed, but also saying, but surely I'm not worthy of it. Surely you don't want me to join your wonderful order. And he just welcomed him in with a gesture and completely changed that man's life, evidently, or chain of lives forever. And he put great emphasis on what he called the 4 immeasurables. And the first of these is equanimity, which is something I say to myself 10 times a day. Equanimity, please. Then love, then compassion, then joy. Without these 4 immeasurables, the enlightened awareness of the Buddha nature would be experienced as barren. They are intrinsic to the Buddha state of luminous awareness. They are beacons that orient us towards the unfolding of our Buddha nature. Essentially, they are qualities that radiate from the heart. Practicing the Noble Eightfold Path over time eliminates the obstacles within us that prevent these radiant qualities from filling our being and informing all our actions. So the great question is often put as, what is enlightenment? And I think it can be defined as the experience of our original Buddha mind or whole state of being, which gives rise to perfect freedom, perfect contentment and joy, deep insight, deep trust in life instead of fear, and the elimination of the fear of death. This is the essence of the shamanic experience of cosmic consciousness, known to shamans and mystics and great teachers of many cultures. When you look at our own society and how deeply it's programmed to fear and anxiety, and how the newspapers continually foster that sense of anxiety and fear, always looking to the next terrible thing that might happen, all that has to go, and you live with a deep trust in life. Nirvana is not a place like heaven. It is not a God realm. It is a permanent, unconditioned state of being. It is ageless, deathless, joyful, and blissful. It is to be in touch with the flow of life in oneself and everything else, to relinquish grasping or wanting or craving or being attached to what one has or what one fears losing. It is replacing fear with trust. It is an expansion of ordinary consciousness to cosmic consciousness, a state of complete awareness and unity with life. Now, Hinduism and Buddhism both emphasize the need for release from the spell of Maya and from samsara, or the chain of causation, and the wheel of rebirth. But I need to point this out to you. This is an up and out cosmology. There's no desire to remain on this planet at all. The aim is to get out of it and stay out of it, unless one is to be a bodhisattva and come back to rescue beings who are still suffering. So this was pointed out to me by a man called Christopher Beish, who was teacher of religious studies at Ohio State University for many years, and who's a close friend of mine. And he's written about it quite deeply, really. So just remember that there is a tendency to consider this to be an up and out, a getting away cosmology. On the other hand, you have the vow of the Bodhisattva, which is, whatever be the highest perfection of the human mind, may I realize it for the benefit of all living beings. Even though I may have to take upon myself all the sufferings of the world, I will not forsake my aim and my fellow creatures in order to win salvation for myself alone. Now, in Taoist cosmology, as with Hindu cosmology, there is no duality. The all is ultimately one. It is emanationist. The one emanates or unfolds to become two, then three, and then the many. Everything in nature is in a constant state of flux and change, which was also the Buddha's realization. Movement is the fundamental nature of the universe. All life emanates from a primal ground, not from a primal God figure. Taoism, like Hinduism, did not separate matter from spirit. It had a profound and respectful relationship with nature and the body. Balance and the relationship of the yin and yang, the feminine and masculine principles. Their attitude to women, the practice of Taoism showed great respect for women. Its aims were non-violence and self-realization, respect for the body, and effective methods of healing, such as acupuncture, qigong, and neigong. And like alchemy, it prepared a subtle body for life beyond death. So this wonderful saying of Lao Tzu goes with this picture, I think. The valley spirit never dies. It is named the mysterious female. And the doorway of the mysterious female is the base from which heaven and earth sprang. It is there within us all the while. Draw upon it as you will. It never runs dry. I love this picture. Absolutely marvelous. The Taoist response to life is essentially gentle, balanced, dynamic, and wise. It is utterly unrelated to the pursuit of goals, power, fame, or success. It is still reflected today in the faces and demeanor of modern sages who live in the sacred mountains of China, where for centuries retreats have been built as places of contemplation in a landscape of utter stillness and breathtaking beauty. The valley spirit never dies. It is named the mysterious female. And the doorway of the mysterious female is the base from which heaven and earth sprang. It is there within us all the while. Draw upon it as you will. It never runs dry. The Taoist response to life was essentially gentle, balanced, dynamic, and wise. It is utterly unrelated to the pursuit of goals, power, fame, or success. As I said, it's reflected in the faces and demeanor of modern sages. And this poem by a man called Chu Si from Changshuang Yuan, Creativity and Taoism, is one of my favorites. The wide pond expands like a mirror. The heavenly light and cloud shadows play upon it. How does such clarity occur? It is because it contains the living stream from the fountain. And they said that the diamond body which develops inside the golden flower is the summation of Taoist alchemy. The Taoists said, whoever attains to this pinnacle of achievement returns to the beauty of nature. That's from the Secret of the Golden Flower that Jung wrote an introduction to. So now I come to Christianity. I saw this painting in Borgo San Sepolcro when I was 15, when I was traveling to Italy on my first trip abroad after the war. Then it was in a very small room which you entered by a low door, and the picture was right in front of one, not in the distance at all, and the impact it made on me was indescribable. Its effect was to make me try and understand the teaching of this extraordinary man, who in the Gnostic text said, I did not come to save you. I did not die for you. I came to remind you who you are. Do not follow me, but become the Christ. That was the essence of his teaching, but it hasn't come through in Christianity at all. So the emphasis of his teaching was about love, compassion, and non-violence. The kingdom of heaven is within everyone and is all around us. Everyone is a son or daughter of God. And there's a Sermon on the Mount, which is worth rereading many times. But the teaching of the Christian church was very different. Belonging to the church and accepting its doctrines was the path to the kingdom of heaven. There was a heavy emphasis on sin and guilt derived from the myth of the fall of man. Original sin was transmitted through the sexual act, thanks to St. Augustine, from AD 418. And there was a dominator model of the Church of Rome, which included the torture and execution of heretics and the conquest of people overseas in the name of Christ. I think the corruption of power entered into the church in AD 325 at the Council of Nicaea, when the male Trinity was created and when God the Father was declared to be the primal creator and Jesus the only Son of God. These were huge, huge statements, and I think some of them were wrong. So what we got was the desacralization of nature. We got the idea that matter is inferior to spirit, and the divine mandate for man to rule the earth was taken from Genesis 2 and 3, which modern science has taken as a kind of rule for itself. The earth is not our true home, but a place to which we've been exiled because of the sin of Adam and Eve. So this also was an up-and-out cosmology. The aim was to get to heaven, so to speak, and leave the earth. There was no reason to stay on earth at all. And that was not really a good idea to teach. And this I've shown you because, again, it made a huge impact. It's one of the most marvelous Romanesque sculptures from Basilica of Mary Magdalene at Vézelay. Nobody knows who the sculptor was who did it, but I had to show it to you because the Romanesque period was the time when people were closest to the divinity of Christ, I think, in representing him in these marvelous images that they made. So the Christian image of God or spirit separated the creator from creation, opening an abyss between them and between spirit and nature. Spirit was masculine or male, and nature was feminine or female, and inferior to spirit. Nature and women were regarded as subject to man. This world was presented as a fallen world, contaminated by sin. Nature was no longer experienced as sacred, as it had been in the shamanic cultures which preceded patriarchy. Spirit was no longer immanent in nature, and they took great care to eradicate all traces of animism. Kabbalism was the only cosmology in the West that held the image of the indissoluble union between the masculine and feminine aspects of the Godhead and between creator and creation. Now, I didn't know any of this when I wrote my book, The One Work. It all came later, much later. but it's what I'm writing about now, and it's in The Dream of the Cosmos. Christianity put the emphasis of its teaching on faith, belief, and belonging to an institution. It omitted the divine feminine from its image of the Trinity. It didn't occur to them to put any feminine image in the Trinity. Quite naturally, it's not their fault. It was that natural at the time. But this severed the umbilical cord between spirit and nature. It did not teach respect for women, the body, the earth, and all its species. This painting, by the way, is by Cecil Collins and hangs in my bedroom. I really love it. Now, there were outstanding exceptions. There were the Christian mystics. There was Hildegard of Bingen. There was St. Francis, Meister Eckhart, Jakob Boehme, the alchemists, and the Kabbalists that I will come to tomorrow. But I'm reading the books about St. Francis, and the way he treated his body was absolutely appalling. The poor body suffered, and he died at the age of 46, I think, mainly through his abuse of the body and exhaustion through trying to change the emphasis of religious teaching at that time. But he still accomplished astonishing things, and he's certainly my favorite saint. But this world was presented as a flawed world, and the spiritual path was a world-renouncing one, whereby the body was seen as the main impediment to the spiritual life. Matter was quite definitely not part of spirit. This led to asceticism, celibacy, and to the demonization and fear of the body, sexuality, and women, and to sexual guilt and shame, which we're still carrying now. The body was a threat, not the sacred vehicle of the soul. Wounding and destroying the body in war was acceptable. Women, being closer to nature, were inferior to and subject to men. And the moral failure of religions is reflected in the consistent and continued rape of women today. If you want to read a book about this, there's Christina Lamb's book, Our Bodies, Their Battlefield, terrifying image of what's happening to women today. Religion hasn't made any difference whatsoever. Look at in India, there's reported in the papers today, 2 Christian women were stripped and raped by a group of Hindu men, and nobody will get punished for it. So I think this explains how and why in a worldwide culture we've come to believe that it doesn't matter what we do to matter. Nature and matter are not part of spirit. We are not part of spirit. The influence of up-and-out cosmologies and the absence of the divine feminine in them explains why we are no longer aware that the earth is a part of a sacred cosmic order, as we once were in lunar culture, presided over by the Great Mother and the goddess. This may be why, despite enlightened teachers and these 4 spiritual paths, we are still morally immature or unconscious, why we have forgotten or ignored the teaching that all life is sacred and that we are part of the sacredness of it. We've also forgotten or ignored this because of the unconscious survival instincts that control the ego and the reality it constructs and becomes enmeshed in or addicted to. This is what Hinduism and Buddhism meant by Maya. For millennia, survival instincts have driven the rulers of nations, to pursue the goals of power, dominance, and control, rather than relationship, service of the planet, and care for all aspects of life. In the pursuit of power, the sacrifice of men in war over some 4,000 years has become acceptable, justifiable, instead of being recognized as the horrific sacrificial ritual it is. And we see this going on in Ukraine now, when colossal numbers of young men have been killed on both sides. For what? Now, deeply unconscious survival instincts have led us to see other ethnic groups and other beliefs as a threat to ourselves and to persecute people with barbaric cruelty. Christianity deliberately destroyed the pagan religions and the Gnostics, and from the 4th to the 18th century, It tortured and murdered heretics. From the 15th century to the present day, it tried to convert the indigenous peoples with appalling cruelty. And in the Christian West, the persecution of the Jews culminated in the Holocaust. In India, the caste system and the shocking persecution of the Dalits undermined the wonderful teaching of Hinduism. In China, the Soviet Union, and Cambodia under communism, the elimination of class enemies was all part of this destruction of anybody who was different. And Islam, conquest by the sword and the murder of apostates, is a theme going right the way through from the 7th century. So really, we haven't progressed very much in 2,000 years. And I think that what's coming now is a kind of reckoning, really. Now, the dragon, this is one of my favorite pictures. The dragon is the symbol of our archaic survival instincts and their power to control our behavior. These survival instincts can be both guide and adversary. As we form a conscious relationship with them or become aware of how they're controlling us, we are released from their power to control us, and we're given access to the treasure that the dragon guards, which is wisdom and how to live in life, really, in touch with these instincts, but not ruled by them. And this is another favorite picture where the dragon is really right with us when we've overcome the negative aspects of these survival instincts. Then those instincts guide us. They act as our primary guide and support. And this wonderful image, I think, illustrates that. So the hero is in the service, if you like, of life and of the instincts, but he's not ruled and governed and possessed by them, as so many of us are today. So coming near the end, the shamanic teachers of all 4 paths to union spoke of our essential, divine, immortal nature and the path to the experience of it. All 4 inspired the most sublime art, particularly architecture, sculpture, and painting. All 4 brought specific gifts to humanity. The Hindu Upanishads brought the divine indwelling Atman. The Buddha Siddhartha, our indwelling Buddha nature. Lao Tzu and Taoism, the need for a profound relationship with nature. And Jesus, or Yeshua, the kingdom of heaven is within us, as well as spread out all around us. Yet there are 4 questions that they have not answered. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where do we go when we die? And why are we here? They haven't really answered them. But I think the answers are beginning to come. So I brought this wonderful words from Edgar Mitchell as he was traveling back from his journey to the moon. He had an epiphany or a sudden awakening, and he suddenly saw the point of our planet and the point of our lives on the planet. It was as though my awareness reached out to touch the furthest star, and I was aware of being an integral part of the entire universe. We are connected, not just to planet Earth, but to the living system of the vast cosmos, of which we are an integral part. Such a wonderful statement, that. And then I want to come to this book by Christopher Beisch, which I recommend to all of you, called LSD in the Mind of the Universe. It's his account of his psychedelic journey over 20 years into the heart of the universe. I would say the soul rather than the mind of the universe, but the publisher likes mind, so the publisher got mind. And he says, the physical universe is not a punishment or a trap into which we've fallen and from which we must be saved. It is not a spiritual wasteland that we should escape from as quickly as possible. The purpose of rebirth or reincarnation is to spiritually awaken, and is not to spiritually awaken and then leave the physical universe. The purpose is to awaken and become a conscious player in its continuing growth and transformation. And I think this is the realization that's being born now, as we realize there is something that we can do to help the earth. There is a reason for us being here, and we are an essential part of the earth's life, as well as the life of the cosmos. He actually describes how he goes with the soul of the universe, whom he calls the beloved, such a beautiful word, as she shows him, first of all the suffering that humanity's experienced, which he has to suffer himself as he takes this journey. And then she gives him revelation after revelation after revelation, as she explains what has happened and why. It's really a wonderful book to read, to understand, and to change your understanding of why we're here. So to end, I've said, which I say always at the end of every talk I give now, we are immortal divine beings, inseparable from the divine ground of the cosmos, both visible and invisible. And I put here the final words that I ended the one work with, because I knew intuitively what I've just been speaking to you about. So I put, I seek the grail, the pearl of great price, the treasure, and I will find them in the cave of my heart. When I have found them, the mystic marriage will take place. I and my Father are one. Samsara and Nirvana are one. Heaven and earth are one, and everything is God.